Jasper Johns was born in Georgia in 1930 and grew up in South Carolina. After moving to New York City to pursue a career as an artist, he found fame in the 1950s for his paintings of flags, maps, and other ordinary everyday objects. These pieces came from the anti-abstract expressionism movement. Johns was most famous for creating paintings of objects in your everyday life that are overlooked due to constant exposure of these items.
The Jasper John painting, it's like the map and the flag where it's an everyday object, but does it have a secret meaning behind it? Do these numbers mean something? Are they like a phone number? Are they an address to somewhere? It's kind of like it relates to the anti-abstract expressionism.
His painting, Numbers and Colors, in 1959 was a painting that consisted of numbers 0 through 9 repeated over and over again. Now what do these numbers mean? I think they give a different meaning to every different viewer. This is what Johns wanted to happen. His art doesn't necessarily try and convey a specific message. Instead, he prefers his audience interpret his art and find a meaning themselves. After I sat down and really took the time to understand the painting, I realized the painting is more about the visual aesthetic. They're more focusing on the process of what it means to put paint on a canvas. They're not trying to elicit any type of emotion or capture any subject matter. They're trying to question what is considered art. The mass production and the ability to create the same thing over and over again could tie into these numbers being repeated over and over again. It's about the repetition on a canvas, and then that canvas being repeated. There's two layers to it. The closer you look at the painting, the more and more detail you find. There looks to be a thick coat of paint over the numbers, but when you look even further, you find bits and pieces of newspapers underneath from current event articles. This painting was easily made by the new idea of printmaking. Printmaking is the means of producing multiple images, each of these called a print. Prints are created from a single original surface, known technically as a matrix or a plate. I personally think the painting itself had more to do with the idea of using printmaking versus the actual meaning of the artwork itself. Johns wrote, "It's the techniques that interest me. My impulse to make the prints has nothing to do with my thinking. It's a good way to express myself. It's more the means to experiment in the technique." The artwork was from the anti-abstract expressionism era. This era was changing art in the way that makes you think, is this art? What even is art? Artists like Rauschenberg and Johns were mostly known for trying to work with the space between life and art. They make it so that their art doesn't necessarily have answers to it, but instead the viewer can make one themselves. You are mostly left with just the colors on the canvas and what that means to you. The numbers in color could be considered anti-abstract expressionism because there's no subject of thought. It comes off as a bunch of random numbers, so there's no real sense to it. So when you lack subject matter, you start to question the artist's motive. The seemingly random group of numbers also has a color scheme to it, which looks to be happy or bright colors. You could look at these numbers and not know what that means, but still get emotion from it due to the colors the artist picked. And that's exactly what these anti-abstract expressionism artists wanted to happen. The painting number 61, Rust and Blue, precedes this Jasper Johns painting. He's pushing this color field style of art and trying to tie in other visual elements, like the numbers. They have similar concepts in that they're both lacking subject matter. You're certainly not even looking at anything. You're seeing a painting of colors, and you're trying to understand what it means to you. But Johns took it a step further by adding repetitive numbers. His famous quote of, "Take an object, do something to it, and do something else to it," is a great example of numbers and color. He took a canvas, added numbers to it, and reproduced those numbers. This painting has even more meaning behind it because it's being reproduced. It's about the paint, it's about the canvas, it's how it's viewed, where the canvas starts and where it ends. With this style of painting, the more time you spend looking at it, the more ways you can find to perceive it. Initially, you see something as simple as a set of numbers, or the painting of a flag or a map, but after learning more about the artists, it's fun to find the complexities within the art. The young generation in the early 1960s were looking at things way differently than their parents were. In the music world, the Beatles were leading the way with the new sounds of rock and roll. Fashion was showing shorter outfits and brightening modern colors. It was the time of rebellion and change. The era of the anti-abstract expressionism definitely made a huge impact on the way that people view art or what they think art is. His art doesn't necessarily try and convey a specific message. Instead, he prefers his audience interpret his art and find a meaning themselves. Johns' painting of numbers created a movement that will never be forgotten.